Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Hands On. My name is Alana, and I'm from the Innovation Cluster. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Innovation Cluster, we're a not-for-profit organization that supports working in innovation, We do so by offering advisory services, access to partners, and workshops such as this one. We encourage you to apply if you have an innovative idea or a startup working in technology. You can apply at www.innovationcluster.ca. So again, welcome to Hands-On Video Techniques to Boost Your Startup Growth Using a Smartphone with Pinot. This workshop will focus on photography and videography using a mobile device. Some learning objectives today are going to be the best settings for your mobile device, techniques and approaches to capture the footage you need, tips and tricks, tools and accessories that can expand the capabilities of your mobile device, some mobile apps, and more. So today we have Mary McDonald, from the Community Program Delivery Manager from Pinot, and I'm going to pass it over to her to get started.
Thanks so much, Alana, and thank you everyone for coming. I'm really excited about today's workshop. I would like you to please introduce yourself in the chat, and if you could mention just your name, what you do maybe, what you're hoping to learn, and also what kind of device you have. I'd like to kind of take a quick scan to see a survey to see which kinds of devices we have. And because we'll be looking at your settings, this is hands-on. So if you don't have your mobile device next to you, then please, this is a good moment to go and get it as well as we begin. And so if you could do those things, make sure you've got your device, introduce yourself in chat, mention what kind of device you have. That's great. We'll be ready to get started. So as mentioned, I'm the manager of the program delivery program and the community program delivery. And I'm also a media artist on the side. And if you did check out my website, my apologies, I've been traveling and doing in-person workshops for the past almost month, which has been lovely, up in Nunavut, where I had limited connectivity and my SSL while I was away, and I wasn't able to renew it until just this morning. So if you were checking out my website and weren't able to access it, you can going forward. So we're going to start with taking a little bit of while people are introducing themselves, just taking a look at different kinds of things that you can use to make video. So I want you to start thinking about a little bit outside the box. What can video be? What can it consist of? So I'm just going to show a couple of examples here. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully, I live in rural Ontario, so the near north, up in Sundridge. So hopefully the internet will play nicely, that we can both show and be on screen at the same time. So again, thinking about what can make a video. Of course, you can just, have your camera on video setting, but there are a lot of other ways to do that as well. So I want you to think about that as we look at a couple of examples. So this is one that I created from a still photo that I edited in multiple different ways. I call it progressive editing. And then I edited the photo to be into a video to progress through those edits. And as you watch, you'll be able to see a change in lighting as well as style, of course. So just to consider, could progressive edits be something that you could use to make a video with from still images? And then another one I wanted to show you, if you have an iPhone and you're aware of live photo can be turned into, it can be a still image, it can be a long exposure, it can be a little video, it can be a looping video or a bouncing video. And this is one live photo, all of this footage. So it's just, again, a quick demonstration of the possibilities contained just even within one little live photo. If you have an Android, there's a similar kind of feature that you can use that isn't quite as encompassing as live photo, but it's still just, something to consider when you're thinking about how you're making video. And here's another one that I want to start at 13 seconds. If I can jump there. We'll start at 10. Okay. This is a time lapse out of a train window in Wales. just again, thinking about what kinds of things can you do. So that was a time lapse, and the fun part was that it went from black and white to change to be edited to look like a drawing, and then made into, back to its original color. I'm going to stop that share, and I'm going to take a look at the chat. Thank you for introducing yourself, and let's see who we have. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And let's see, we have iPhone 12. I have an iPhone 10 XS. And I know Melissa has an XR, iPhone XR. So I see some people have, we have some Androids. We have some iPhones of various different, various different levels. Wonderful. Google Pixel. Okay. That's what I have as my work phone. Nice. Okay. A nice variety. Okay. So let's take a look at the settings first of all, because it's all in the tips and tricks that you're using for your actual device. So if you can go into your settings, and I'm going to share my iPhone. It's not going to look exactly like yours, obviously, but many of the similar settings can be found. If you are working from an Android, I will share that first of all, where you will find those settings. And then I will demonstrate live on my iPhone, and then we can always go back to the Android if needed. So in your Android, I'm going to start a share. So when you're in your Android camera, many of the settings can actually be accessed right within the camera. And you do that by, like, once you're in the camera, and then you'll notice, depending on what mode you're in, whether you're in camera or video, when you tap the little drop down arrow at the top, which usually is up here at the top, you'll see a gear setting icon open up on the bottom right. So first of all, let's get everybody finding their settings, and please let us know if you are having difficulty finding where to access your settings. For iPhone, we actually go into settings itself, and I'm going to walk through that. But for Android, I wanted to make sure you were set up with us before we began. So once you tap that settings button, it will open up the settings for that particular mode. And so as you go through each one of the modes, some of the settings are global and some of the settings are divided for the actual mode. Okay, so we'll walk through the settings together, and then please do interrupt. Like, you can feel free to unmute and ask the question, or put it in the chat, and Melissa is going to help identify which questions we need to, that I haven't noticed, because I can't look at the chat and everything else really as very well. So she will identify for me if there's something that we need to help you with. But make sure everyone can find their settings. And again, hopefully you can find all of these settings. They'll be slightly different, but we can navigate through them. So I'm going to change my share to.
Someone did ask for you to repeat
Sure.
what you just said. There you go.
Oh, sorry. Repeat what I just said. Okay, thank you. So we're going to start by looking at our settings. So I'm going to cancel this out. I'm still screen sharing, I guess. Okay, we're going to make sure that everyone can look at their settings, because we want to look at the under the hood first. So everyone can have their device ready. For if you're an Android, probably it's within the camera app itself. If you go to the camera app, and then there's a tiny little white arrow that you tap on, and you should find that box that I've shown a screenshot of with the little gear icon. So see if you can find that if you have an Android. For the iPhone, we're going to go into settings themselves. And where we want to do that. So I'm just getting myself set up. There we go. So if you can go to the actual settings app and scroll down to camera. So you should see the camera app, and I'm going to open that up. And again, everyone has a different device, slightly different device. So all of these are going to be a little bit different. Please do let us know if you haven't been able to find your equivalent setting. And we're just going to kind of walk through what all of these settings are, what they do, and what choices you might want to make. So first of all, I'm going to start with the formats one at the top. Now for Android, it's slightly different. And I think we'll come back to this one for the Android, but for iPhone, you probably want to have a high efficiency chosen. They do, as you can see, it reduces the file size, but doesn't reduce any of the quality, and it is very shareable. And again, Android, we'll revisit that one when we go back through the screenshots. Next, take a look at your record video. This is our workshop mostly focused on video techniques, so this is really, really key. If you're in the Android, again, go inside the camera app itself, and then tap on the little arrow, find the gear icon, and you should be able to find your choices here. A lot of people are confused by what these choices mean and when you should make which choice. It is rather confusing. So we're going to do sort of a quick overview and why you might want to make certain choices when you make them. I have 4K at 30 frames per second chosen, and that's generally where I keep it, because most of the time when I pick up my camera, if I'm going to make a video, it's generally speaking for arts purposes. It does take a lot of room. Don't be like Mary. I have a 2 terabyte computer that is completely full, 2 terabytes of iCloud storage that is also completely full, and a 500 something gigabyte phone that is also full. I need to do a major digital declutter, which I haven't yet had time to do. But, you know, if you know that every time you pick up the camera, you're going to be making an arts video, then certainly keep it at your highest setting so that you don't accidentally forget and take footage at a lesser quality, because we're going to look at these other choices here. 720p is a lesser quality than 4K, but it takes up less storage. As you can see here at the bottom, 40 megabytes is how much 720p HD at 30 frames per second. It only will take up 40 megabytes of your phone and your iCloud, but you're losing quality. So if most of the time you pick up your phone, it's going to be for family photos, and you're going to remember before you do an arts photo to come back in and change your settings, then you might want to choose to keep yours set at a lower setting. 1080p is sort of standard. HD stands for high definition. So 1080p is generally speaking what people are streaming and what is most effective. So if you're looking for sort of the most bang for your buck, but not too much storage space, and if it's mostly things like that, you're going to be sharing this video now and you're not going to need it in future as footage, it might be more commercial sort of based, and it's just a quick, you know, maybe an Instagram video or something. Certainly you can choose 1080p in that and you'd be happy with that. It's good quality. Most of the time, even though 4K is like right now is like the highest, although I know that in the industry they're going a lot higher, but most of the time we aren't streaming at 4K. So the reason to have it at 4K is if you're going to be saving this footage for the future, if you're going to be, you know, using it in an arts manner, and when you edit video, you're stuck with the lowest common denominator. You can't upgrade. So if you're going to be combining multiple pieces of video, you need to have the highest quality that you're going to save, because you're going to be you won't be able to change those bits forward. So if you had 3 that were 4K and 1 that was 1080p, you'd be stuck with the 1080p as your common denominator across that you'd have to edit it at and export it at. So again, making those choices of when you're going to need to use it. If it's kind of current, a more commercial thing, you're not saving it, 1080p is going to be good enough, give you a really good quality, but not take up too much storage. Now let's take a look at these numbers. 30 frames per second, that's what the FPS stands for, frames per second, versus 60 frames per second, which are our choices for most of them. We'll revisit the 24 in a moment, but 30 frames per second and 60 frames per second refers to how often the camera is taking information. So if you're getting 60 frames per second, obviously you're getting more information caught, which will give you a more realistic view. and a smoother view. If you're doing video that contains a lot of movement, a lot of action, you might want to have 60 frames per second chosen. Usually like GoPros and action videos will definitely choose 60 frames per second. If it's for gaming, if you're creating video for gaming backgrounds, then you probably want 60 frames per second. But other than that, you probably don't. It's harder to share. It's not necessarily compatible with things, and it takes up a lot of storage space. The 24 frames per second will give you, which is available at 4K in the iPhone. And again, you may have different settings. You may have more available, but this is sort of the most common. 24 will give you more of that cinematic view, which actually is not all that, it's not real, not as real. And that's what people prefer if they're getting that cinematic sort of feel. That's actually part of it is that it looks less real. It's not hyper real. Okay, so Melissa, are there any questions, or I'll invite anybody with any questions about high definition, whether to choose 1080p or 4K. And if there aren't any questions, or if anybody's had difficulty finding their settings for this on their device.
There's no questions. Oh, there is.
Okay.
When do we use 4K 60? Sorry, pardon me.
Okay, great. Thank you for the question. So 4K is like at the moment the highest quality that you can get with mobile phones, I believe. I know that in the industry they're starting to work at like 8K, 5K and 8K, but 4K is kind of the highest from mobile device. So it's the best quality that you can get with your video, with your mobile device in terms of camera. 60 frames per second refers to how often that camera is going to be getting the information. So if it's getting 60 frames per second every single moment of video, then you're capturing more information and your video is going to look a lot more real, and will capture movement really well. It's not necessarily, I wouldn't choose it unless you're deliberately choosing something that needs to be super high quality because you're going to save this footage and perhaps use it in the future and use it in multiple ways. And 60 frames per second is really definitely good for movement and things, but not really necessary for anything else in terms of the cost benefit. So hopefully that answered your question. And if not, please, we'll take more questions at the end as well. So if you continue to have questions about this, feel free to either connect with me after the workshop, or I'll also stay on at 1 o'clock if anybody wants to discuss anything else in further detail. So we're going to go out of this video settings, go back. If you're in an iPhone, you can go back to the general camera settings. Oh, sorry. Yes, I see a question. Thank you, Andres.
I want to ask about the different 4K resolution. Can we combine some of them, for example, two videos 4K 30 per second and with the 60 per second? Is it okay if you want to combine them?
Yes, and we'll touch on editing a little bit later. And I've got an excellent video, mobile video editing app to recommend. And we don't have enough time to deal with it today in terms of how to use that app, but I'm happy to come back or to be contacted for future help with that. Certainly you can combine them in an app like that, or any editing app. The problem is when you go to export it, you can't export higher than your lowest resolution. So if you're mixing a 1080p and a 4K, you can only export it as 1080p. You won't be able to export it as 4K. You have to go with your lowest common denominator of all the pieces.
So if you know the lowest quality.
Sorry?
Export file, it depends on the lowest quality, yes?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you've got 3 files, you'll only be able to export it whichever one was the lowest quality. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
There's another question in the chat.
Sure. Yeah. Melissa, do you want to read it to me? Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Does high quality video slow down loading? And do different apps automatically reduce video quality?
Excellent questions. I believe that different apps do. I think often, like YouTube, you can choose whether you're going to watch it in which quality you're going to watch it in. It definitely affects bandwidth, and it definitely affects loading time. Absolutely. So again, if you're looking at, where are you going to be putting this video? Where is it going to be shared? If it's going to be shared on your website, it's probably not going to be stored on your website, but will be uploaded to either Vimeo or YouTube, in which case people have the preference to watch it according to what bandwidth they have available. Instagram, I haven't really looked under the hood at this, but I'm pretty sure they do reduce the quality of different things. So, but again, I haven't explored it enough to be able to say that categorically, but I do know that if you choose one of Instagram's filters, that it tends to reduce the quality and clarity of the picture. So I generally do my own filters and upload into Instagram without using theirs. Okay. And I think there were two parts to that question, Melissa. Would you be able to read that to me again? There was something about
For
the apps.
sure.
And
So does high quality video slow down loading, and do different apps automatically reduce video quality? So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, absolutely. It does affect loading. So you want to be thinking about, where will this video be shared? Why am I making it? When am I going to use it? And what's critical about this, what in terms of quality, because there's a cost benefit always to be taken into account. Okay, so hopefully those answered those, but please feel free to keep those questions coming. That's what this is all about. I'm going to
Before you go back, Mary, there's two more comments in there.
Okay, sure.
Ropa says Instagram does reduce the quality, but if you go into settings, you can change them to upload them in a higher quality.
Oh, nice. Okay, thank you.
Now, and then why do we use high quality like 4K when we build a video?
Okay, so again, it really depends on your purpose. So video, and we'll touch on this after we look at the settings, but when you're thinking about video, really the key is planning to begin with. Before you record any video, or ideally, before you record video, you want to know why you're recording it. What is your purpose? Where are you going to share it? And when are you going to share it? And how are you going to use that footage? Are you planning to keep it and use it in the future? Are you going to, as well as now, are you going to be combining it with other clips or still images? Or are you going to just share a tiny little snippet right now on social media? All of those play into what choice should I make for which settings. Okay. So a really quick one, looking at record slow-mo. So slow motion, I've got two choices. My iPhone, I think the newer iPhones, I only have an XS. So I saw some 11s and 12s have more choices potentially. Your Android might have more choices, but I'm showing this mostly just to make you aware that you can actually choose the quality that your recording is set at, your video is set at, for each kind of video. And if you're an Android and you choose your slow-mo inside the camera, slow motion video, if you're right inside your camera app, one of your choices under video will be slow motion, normal, or time lapse, probably. Those are your choices. You might have more choices.
Sorry, Mary. Erica says that the options are the same on her iPhone 12 Pro, just for reference.
Excellent. Thank you. Good to know. My XS is as good as a 12, at least in that aspect. Thank you.
Someone says they do not have this feature, the slow-mo.
Slow motion. Okay. Is that, I saw someone with an iPhone 6. So I think some of these, I don't know which.
Oh, I looked up back in the chat. They have an iPhone 11.
Oh, then you should have slow motion. I wonder, are you in settings that you can see whether or not slow motion is an option? Oh, your actual, like the settings might be different in an iPhone 11. You might not see it here, but just to know that you do have a choice for slow motion, which quality. And again, so if we just, sorry, I'll quickly look at that again. My choices are 1080p at 120 frames per second, or 1080p high definition, which is what HD stands for, at 240 frames per second. So again, it's a matter of storage, and it's a matter of when are you going to use it? Why are you going to use it? What are you combining it with? 240 frames per second will make things definitely more slow, but more smooth, but definitely takes up more storage. It's always that weighing out why and how much storage you can afford to give to this. Some people may have an option to record stereo sound. We're going to touch on sound specifically in a few moments, but I would just like to say that I do have stereo sound chosen. If you do have an option, it's probably a good idea to have. And if you're making, we'll discuss this in greater detail in a moment when I show you some gear. But if you are making a video and you're just using sort of background sound, the iPhone at least, and the Android I'm pretty sure as well, has a pretty decent microphone just for sort of ambient sound. If you're actually getting someone speaking, that's a whole different thing, and we're going to talk about that more in a moment. I'm going to do a fairly quick overview of the rest of the settings because I don't want us to run out of time for everything else. But I invite you to kind of really take a look under the hood of your camera and really get to know what settings you have and even play with them. You know, what happens when I choose this? But just in a quick overview, preserve settings means that you can choose that every single time you set up your camera or open your camera, it's going to have the same settings you had it at last time. That's really handy if you're going in to do a specific shoot with the same light conditions, the same setup. You might want to have these, you know, chosen so that they always open in the same way. So it's really a matter of preference. How do you like to work? Or do you want to start from scratch each time you go to take a new photo? Burst photos as well, we'll come back to, and there was a weird, it's changed where you where you can find it. So well, it might have to come back to it for Android. It was a weird sort of thing, but burst photos, in case you're not aware of what they are, burst photos basically put your camera on action, put your mobile, I know if you had like what I call real cameras, the DSLR cameras, you can often choose like an action setting where it will take lots and lots of photos really quickly all at the same time, like very, very quickly, one after another. That'll take lots of different photos of the same thing, quicker than just normal hitting of the shutter. It used to be in an iPhone that all you had to do was hold your shutter button and it would just take tons of photos. But then they changed that to now when you hold your shutter button, it turns it into a video. It takes video automatically. It's sort of a quick way to get into video. But then that means that how on earth do you access burst photos? So for an iPhone, if you like using burst photos, and I do recommend burst photo settings if you're going to be capturing any kind of sports or action or movement, and if you're going to be recording, like taking still photographs of people, especially children, because if you have that burst and you can just hit your shutter button and get a ton of photos, then you have lots of different choices and you're going to get a nice expression on the face versus versus not being able to capture that tiny little moment when that happened. So that's what that means, this burst photo. And we'll have to look for it again on Android, but if you're interested in burst photos, you do need to look for the setting. They've changed it.
Someone had mentioned, sorry, Mary, that burst photos are great for action-based advertising.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, anything with any kind of movement, because basically what you're getting is a still image, but instead of having to only capture when you can push that shutter button, it's taking a gazillion, and then you get to choose after. And you can choose those from your camera roll, and you can choose to save all of them if they're all great, or you can go through and identify which ones you want to keep. Again, it's that storage and what kind of keeping your footage and making that manageable. But just aware that it has, because of this quick video thing, it's changed as to how you access it. I highly recommend that you have grid on, the grid on your camera, and you do have to set that up. And in Android, if you are, that's one of the global settings. When you go into the camera app, the little down arrow, and then you find your gear settings, it will be under composition. And you actually have a choice of grid type. For iPhone, it's just, do you want the grid on or off? But in the Android, you have a choice of grid type, and you can just look at those and decide which ones are most useful. But they can be helpful for lining up your shot, for composing your shot, for making sure that your horizon is even, using either the rule of thirds or the golden rule, I think it's called, about kind of what's pleasing to the eye with that sort of often occurs in nature, where you have something sort of not quite center, but slightly off center, and then the spirals around it. It can just help you set that up, and that saves on your editing and makes your photos better. And let's unpack HDR for a moment, because not everyone knows what this means. I have both chosen, but again, I have lots of storage taken up now, but I still would go with this. What I need to do is go through and get rid of the ones that I don't want to keep. HDR is high dynamic, oh my goodness, high dynamic resolution. There we go, I blanked for a moment. High dynamic resolution is what HDR stands for. And essentially what happens when you take a still photo with Smart HDR, it actually takes 3 photos and at 3 different lighting settings and combines them into one. Sometimes that's really great. Sometimes I prefer to see the lighting that I saw myself, and I don't want the HDR, and I want to just edit that myself in post-editing. The other thing that can happen if you choose HDR, because it's taking 3 photos that are successive, they're very quick in succession, but they are successive. If there's any possibility for any kind of movement in your photo, it's going to show up as blur. So you might have 2, so that's why I have Smart HDR chosen, plus I have keep my normal photo, because I can compare and choose which one I want to keep. And if there's anything that could have been moving in that photo, you will notice in the HDR that it was blurry. So that's a really quick overview of settings. We can come back to this at the end if there are more questions about settings, but I would like to talk about some techniques and other aspects of making video, and then we can return to settings unless there are other questions. So I get set up for the next sharing. I'm going to stop this share. And get ready to share the next thing. So next we're going to talk about, this is a handout I'm going to share with you at the end. And I'm just going to make this so you will get this handout at the end. It has lots of tips and tricks on it, as you'll notice. But we're going to talk about tips and techniques and talk about gear for a few moments. So on this handout, which I will make sure I upload into the chat at the end, and I'll also make sure that Alana has a copy so that she can distribute it to people. The very top is this picture of my gear setup, and it all fits in this little backpack. The lovely thing about mobile photography is that it's way cheaper. If you've ever bought a lens or anything for a quote unquote real camera, you'll notice that, you could get a whole lot of mobile digital gear for one lens or one thing for a real camera. So that's one benefit. It's also very accessible in terms of its packability, which makes it a lot easier to take on the road, which is I really like because I'm a traveler. So we're going to go over some gear to help you take video and still images, and then we're also going to go over some techniques that are important. So this little picture here shows some of my gear, and I'm also going to actually stop the share so I can show you in real life what I have here. I've got all my toys set up here beside me. And as part of this discussion, we're going to talk about sound specifically. But first of all, let's look at stabilizing, because for us, some still images and certainly for video, stabilizing is one of the most key aspects, and there are different ways to do that. So first of all, in terms of keeping your camera sort of still so that you can record the movement or take a still image that's still, there are lots of different tripods on the market. And the nice thing about what they've done with mobile gear is that they have kept all the adapters the same for an iPhone or an Android phone mount. The little adapter, the screw that goes on to anything like tripods and stuff, is exactly the same as for a regular camera, a DSLR. So anything that you have for DSLR will actually, with a mount for your phone, then you can actually use those same devices, which is really nice. So here I have my mount that's was my quote unquote expensive one. I think it was somewhere between maybe as much as $30. I don't know. It's by Joby. And all of these links are on that handout that I will share with you. And it has the same adapter. It'll thread onto any kind of tripod, and you can multi-position this one. So it was a little bit more expensive. You can also get them at the dollar store. They'll do the exact same thing. They just secure onto your phone so that you can then use this adapter to attach it to other things like tripods. Another cheap hack is a lot of selfie sticks you can get at the dollar store. The mounting head is often one that you can just screw off. So there you go. You've got your selfie stick, and then you also can have a mount that you can screw off and use onto other accessories. The other nice thing about a selfie stick is that you can use it as a monopod. A monopod is like a tripod, but it has one instead of try for three. And you can use it to help stabilize for any kind of movement that you want to make. If you're videoing and you want to do a pan, or you want to, you know, raise it or lower it, or just kind of scan all around, you can just make sure that your selfie stick is resting on something and use it as what they call a monopod for movement. So that's a little trick, little hack trick. In terms of tripods you can get on the market, there's this cool little, I think it's Gorilla or Joby, that can bend. I was really excited to get this, and then I realized when I did get it, hard once you've bent it to get it back level. So I don't actually end up using this one as much as I thought I would. But so to note, if you only have one tripod, I'm not sure I'd go with the bendy one. You can also get Manfrotto, makes a really nice tabletop one, and this head up here is somewhat adjustable and can tilt. So if you're doing things like jewelry or anything that you're trying to sell that you want to take some video of, this kind of little tabletop might be useful. And this is an Amazon Basics. It actually has, so it was I think $20. It has a level at the top. And again, this mount will hold anything, including any regular camera. And it has legs that telescope out three levels, so it can go quite high actually. And it all folds up into a tiny little carry case that will fit in my carry-on size backpack. And very cheap, which is great. The other thing that you want to think about for stabilizing is how you're actually pressing your shutter, because you can introduce a lot of movement when you're trying to press the shutter. And depending on what you're either photographing or videoing, it might also, your shadow might be getting in the way. You might not be able to get the right light angle that you want without also then getting yourself in the photo or getting your shadow in the photo. So you can get things like Bluetooth shutters, and this is super cheap one, I think Amazon, but I think you can also get them at the dollar store, and it just connects to your phone so that instead of touching your actual phone to start the photograph or video, you can actually just touch this button, which then allows you also to move away and out of the picture, which is really nice. I've heard, I actually haven't tested this yet, but I've heard that the Apple earbuds do the same thing when you press the volume, but test that. I'm not positive about that. Lastly, for stabilizing, you can actually get what they call it's a DJI is the make that I have, and if you're getting into like actual making short films, or even one of the links I have on the handout is about Hollywood making real videos, real films with an iPhone. If you're getting into that kind of thing, you might want to look at getting something like this DJI Osmo gimbal. And what a gimbal does for real cameras, when you're, if you're on an expensive movie set, they'll have all sorts of different kinds of ways to take panning shots and to take dolly shots and all sorts of movements. You can actually get the same thing for a phone with this kind of a gimbal. There's newer versions. This is an older version. And you could just put your phone in, and then it allows you to it's not going to show because I'm not set up at the moment, but you have little trigger buttons and you can actually use it for, you know, panning movements and rising and falling, and it will stabilize it while you're moving the camera essentially. And those are also relatively cheap, a couple $100, but you know, if you're looking at real equipment, it's not bad for what it allows you to do. Links are in the handout as well. So that's stabilizing. Just to note that you can actually get lenses as well for your camera, for your iPhone or your Android phone, sorry. So I have a wide angle lens, which, you know, if you want to do wide angle video, which often, you know, film and Hollywood uses that sort of wide angle approach. And this actually will just, I have a little adapter for this one, and it just literally goes on my iPhone. So just to note that these do exist. My system is I don't know how you pronounce it. It's ZYTLUS, so Zeitlus or something, but it's real, you know, real glass, real German lens quality. Moment, I think, is what I would actually recommend. They make a better system, I think.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sure, yeah.
Someone asked what the name of the previous tool was.
Oh, sure, the gimbal.
Right.
It's a DJI Osmo is the one that I have, and I don't know if anybody else is making a gimbal, but there are newer versions, but it's also linked in the handout. But yeah, it's called a gimbal, GIMBAL. So again, thank you for that question. That's great. Yeah, so just to be aware that you can get lenses. My favorite photography lens is a macro, but I still have it packed. I just got back from Nunavut and it's still packed in my bag, so I don't have it to show you, but love macro photography. So just to know it's possible. Okay, let's talk about sound, because sound is one of the most critical parts of video. The saying goes that sound is the most critical piece, that people will forgive you for bad visuals, but they will not forgive you for bad sound. That's like, anywhere you look that up, that's repeated a million times across the internet. So the takeaway there is, if you can't have good sound, don't have sound at all. Or replace it with a video, like a soundtrack or something, or music that you've put in later, or put in some kind of audio track that you've recorded separately and put it in later. And if we, you know, the editing app that is referenced on the handout, you can do that. It's a free mobile video editing app, which is great because video editing apps are otherwise quite expensive and complex, but the free mobile one is amazing, can be do really sophisticated things, including being able to swap out sound. So know ahead of time when you're making video, what is your plan for sound? Are you going to try to use the sound from your actual video? Are you going to be taking that sound out? Are you going to be replacing it with a soundtrack or a recording? Or are you going to go with no sound? And no sound is better than bad sound, basically. If you're going to try to record and use the sound that you've got, if you're just doing sort of ambient sound, the phone itself isn't too bad. But if you want any kind of speaking or specific sounds, you're going to need to get an accessory. So I have a couple of those here. And again, they're linked on the handout. This one is called, this one is the Shure Motive. In retrospect, I wish I'd gone with the other one. The Shure was okay. The other one is the Rode, which I think is RODE, but again, linked on the handout. The Shure Motive, they just hook into your phone at the end. They usually have an app. These accessory microphones, they have an app that you can use to control the actual microphone. And it's, generally speaking, you can have multiple positions. You'll want to be thinking about what kind of filter you have. This one came with what's called a pop filter. And a pop filter just prevents you from getting those plosives, as they're called, recording those. So it just minimizes that. Another thing that you can do is make sure that the microphone isn't too close to someone's mouth to avoid those plosives, because they're impossible to edit out. Trying to edit out plosives is like trying to do surgery, essentially. Like, you'd have to slice a sound and get it so expanded that you can take out just that second and put it back together. It's a nightmare. So you really just want to avoid them to begin with. Another trick to avoid plosives is, if you're having a microphone close, you're trying to get someone's, speaking, then you can put it at a 45-degree angle. to the person speaking, and that way you're not getting the direct line of coming out. So that can help minimize that. So this is what's called a shotgun mic. If you had, you know, a big setup, and again, it just connects to your phone. There are fancy sort of setups where you can get a whole sort of holder for your phone and all the devices that go on it. If you're really getting serious into all this, you could look into those, but they're not necessary if you're just sort of occasionally doing sound, or even doing sound fairly often. So again, the Shure Motive was okay. I fell for the ad, but I think in retrospect, the Rode was a better choice. And you can also, in terms of filters, you can also get what's called, sorry for the name, I didn't invent it, it's called a dead kitten. And it, and it's good for, it just goes over top of your microphone, and it's good for if you're outside to take away wind noise and things like that. You will need one of those. The other kind of microphone I have two more that I can share with you. And these are linked as well to on the handout. This one's called, this is the Sennheiser. And Sennheiser clip mic, and it comes with a little clip and actually just clips on. And it's really, really, really good for getting voices. It's like top industry quality and not top price, which is really nice. So it's linked. It is a couple $100. A colleague of mine who makes poetry films, that's one of the things that I do, found another one that's very similar called Boya, and it was a lot cheaper. So, and said that she liked the quality of that too. So certainly you can investigate, but these do exist, and they just clip on, and this way you could get one person speaking really well. It's going to be difficult to get more than one person with this speaker or microphone. So then you might want to look at something more like a shotgun mic if you're getting more than one person speaking. And lastly, to share with you, this one was recommended to me by a sound artist in the UK. And this is the H3 VR Zoom. It has 4 microphone capsules, and it can actually do ambisonic and 360 sound. So if you're making video to sell something, for instance, you could put in a cool soundtrack, but you could also record your own really cool soundscape and put that into your video. So, and it's super easy to use, connects with your phone, and not too bad for price given what it can do. Ambisonic sound, so 360 sound is obviously, immersive sound like that in all directions. Ambisonic means that it uses the bones in your ears and your head to actually play sound, so that you can get direct, exact placement of sound. But this sound is happening right here, and this one's happening far away, and this one's coming behind you. That's what ambisonic does.
Mary, another question.
Yes.
Someone asked where they could watch your short films or view your pictures.
Oh, thank you. So my website has a lot of stuff, and I can put that in the chat in another moment. And now that I've updated it this morning, now that I'm back into connection, it says you can go ahead and look at it. I was most dismayed to visit it after I got back from my travels in Nunavut and discovered that it had shut down and expired while I was gone, but it's now updated. So, and I'll put that in the chat in a few moments. Okay, so we've talked about sound, we've talked about stabilizing. Let's talk about some really, really, really key techniques. And I'm going to share probably my camera again, I think, to make sure that we do this. I'm just going to get that set up.
Someone also asked about lighting.
Nice, excellent question. Thank you. I hadn't gotten there yet, but that's a very important question. So, and it's part of what I'm going to share right now. Okay.
So I think that Mary might be frozen, so let's just give her a minute. Like she said, we can stay on past 1 if people are able to. I think there's, sorry, she's just unmuting.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. I don't know what made that happen. Oh, my Wi-Fi is went, I guess. Okay, let's try this again. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. If it does, I'll just describe what I'm trying to do. Okay. Okay, the joys of living in rural rural places. Okay, here we are. So we're in the camera app, and I have here my little loon that an artist in London made. There we go. So lighting for Android's actually better for this. I prefer my iPhone for most occasions, but iPhone does not work well in low lighting, as I'm sure you've already experienced. I don't even bother. If it's low lighting, I don't even bother with my iPhone. I just make sure that I'm in good lighting. The best lighting is natural lighting. So if you're indoors, if you can be near a window, like I have a massive window right here in front of me, that gives really good light. Or being outside in the first place, just watch your shadows, and then possibly, you'll need to move your camera and you'll potentially get yourself out of the shot as well to minimize that difficulty. Android actually does much better in lower light conditions. I was able to get northern light shot for the first time with my Android this time when I was in Nunavut. I was really excited to be able to do that. Not great, I mean, not sharing quality, but fun to share with family. But so you want to think about your source of light, direction of light, and generally speaking, natural light is best. And the better the lighting, the better your video. Even with an Android, it really doesn't work well if you don't have good lighting. So try to set yourself, just be proactive, set yourself up so you have good light. The next key thing is to make sure you lock your focus and lock your lighting. I have a sad story. I discovered this to my detriment, that I didn't do this when I took my footage. I was doing an interview with a colleague, and I walked away with footage that ended up looking like I was in a strobe lighting, because my camera kept trying to adjust, because your mobile devices are really good at automatically setting up for lighting and for focus. And because she was in front of a window underneath a lamp, the entire video, my camera was trying to get the best lighting, and the footage afterwards was just like this flicker. It was awful. So the way you want to make sure that you lock your focus and your lighting, and really key for video, is that you're going to tap to focus, and notice how you get this for the iPhone, you get a little sun. I think it's a similar icon for Android, but to lock it, you're going to, for an iPhone, you're going to hold it. And now you can see I've got this AEAF lock showing. If you're taking video, this has to be the last thing you do before, or check, the last thing you check for sure before you walk away from that camera. If you're turning your attention away or getting in the video itself or moving away, you must make sure you've got this locked. Lock your focus, because otherwise, like I said, your entire footage is going to be filled with your camera trying to adjust and find the best focus and lighting. To adjust that lighting for Android, you'll notice when you tap to hold, there'll be a little lock icon that shows up. I don't have that, I just get AEAF lock. But on the Android, it should be when you tap to, just confirm this, that they haven't changed it. When you tap to focus on something and you long hold, it's went to long. It's going to show you a little lock icon. But similarly, you'll have a sliding adjuster that you can change your lighting. Generally speaking, the mobile devices are pretty good at picking up the best lighting when you focus on your object. Now, if I'm choosing to focus elsewhere, I want to make sure I tap away on my phone, and then again, long hold and press wherever I want to lock that focus. And then I can also adjust the lighting, but often it's going to be the best lighting is what it automatically set up. You may want to make slight adjustments depending. So that's one of the most critical things. Thank you for asking the question about lighting. So it's a combination of being proactively setting up your lighting and then making sure that you're locked in.
Someone also asked if you know any like tools or accessories for lighting.
Yeah, I haven't explored that. There are lots of different lights you can get. It's depending on what your purpose is. If you're trying to take video or stills of things like jewelry or things like that, there you can get a light box. There's also something called a ring light, which you can get, which doesn't create shadows, but just kind of creates ambient light. Another trick for lighting is just a regular light that you put don't put the light, generally speaking, you don't want to put the light right on your subject, but you want to bounce it off a wall because you'll get a more diffused, nice light. So if you have even just a desk lamp that you put near your subject and then point it at a wall and just play with that and then take some shots to experiment. And that's my other key. If you're in a situation where you're taking deliberate video or stills for anything, check your footage before you leave, because it's going to be awful to walk away and then discover that that moment has passed. You can't recreate that moment. You can't go back. You can't whatever, and you haven't got the footage that you thought you were going to have. I also want to show for the iPhone users, if you're not aware of how to do this, I want to show you live photo. And for Android, again, there's somewhat similar, but not fully. It's called motion pictures, I think. And now it seems to be kind of set that it happens automatically. But for iPhone users, it's this little icon up in the top right corner. You can see that now it says live, and I've got this is turned into yellow. And if I turn it off, sorry, yep, a question? Question?
I have a question about the focus that you mentioned with for the video mode. If, for example, if I want to take a video from for example 4 or 3 objects, can I use the focus lock for 3 objects? Can I select it, or just can I want to use for one of them? For example, 3 people among other people. Can I use the lock focus for that one also?
If you have, I can't remember which device you had. If you have people's faces
iPhone
showing up.
11.
iPhone, yeah. So you'll probably notice, this isn't going to trigger because I don't have faces, but you'll
Yes,
probably
iPhone
notice,
have face recognition, yes.
yeah, so it'll identify that there are faces, and then it's actually focusing on those 3. If it's not people that you're getting and you're just getting 3 objects like this, it's not like you're really going to have to choose. You still have to kind of choose where you're focusing. You can't focus in more than one spot. However, you can proactively set it up. You want to think about depth is going to make a difference. Like if I went above these, the head of the loon is higher than the other 2 objects. So the problem with this is if I lock on the head, the other 2 objects and the back of the loon are going to be slightly out of focus. So if I lock somewhere else, like say on the table, that's probably, sorry, my arm's shaking a little bit here, which is making it move. I apologize, but that's going to get a more even distribution of the focus amongst the 3 different textures and 3 different heights. So it's probably going to be a matter of, how you set up your shot. And I would test first, not only do you check your footage after, but also test at the beginning, make a test, make a sound check, make a visual check. They do those things in videos on when they're making, professionals are doing it for a reason. You don't want to waste your time and energy in your footage. So set it up, see if it's going to work, and test. But excellent question. So here, also notice that as I switch between photo and video, look at what a difference there is between my focus. I haven't moved my arm at all. And so again, you really want to, if you're switching between still and between video, you want to make sure that you're, test and set up properly for both, or take one at a time, because that's a huge difference in terms of the look of that, isn't there? Now, the other thing that's key, and I know it's 1 o'clock, but I definitely want to touch on this before we leave, is that you need to choose your ratio, your dimensions, especially for video. So right now I'm in photo. I'm going to tap the little arrow at if my screen was landscape, sorry, if it was portrait, I'll move it back to my loon here. If you tap in the little drop down menu that happens, there's a little arrow at the top. Now you can see I've got a choice between having the flash on, the live on, and then this 4:3, which is what I'm talking about with dimensions or ratio, timer, and filters. Filters, I would tend to just do filters post editing. It's nowadays you can do so much digitally afterwards that I probably wouldn't use filters to begin with. If I tap on this 4:3, it gives me my options. Basically what we're talking about is what shape and size is this ratio. And this is really critical, especially if you're combining, depending on where you're sharing it, but also if you're combining video with still. My choices here are square, which is 1:1. So if you're sharing directly to Instagram, square is great because then you can compose your shot for that specifically. 4:3 is probably going to be your default set for stills, but 16:9 ratio is standard for video. So I'm going to change it to, usually video we take in landscape orientation. 16:9 is standard. If you're sharing to YouTube or Vimeo, if you don't have it in 16:9 ratio, if you haven't exported your film or your footage that way, you're going to end up with black, what they call letter boxes around the edges of your footage. So if you're combining still images with video and you don't want to end up changing your photo, you would end up having to either blow it up and crop it or ending up with like misjointed pieces put together, which doesn't look nice. You'll want to proactively set your stills to 16:9. In Android, it should be as well within the settings within that mode in your app. If I go to video, I have the same choice. I'm going to open this little drop-down menu. And you can see, where did it go? It's now only showing me. Okay, the 16:9 is automatic now. Yeah, so just to know that that's going to automatically be in 16:9 shape and ratio. And if you're going to be combining with other video or with other stills, make sure that you set up ahead of time that it's also 16:9. So we're at just at a little bit past one. I'm going to stop sharing for the moment. I'm going to put the handout in the chat and you can get it directly from the chat if you want to, or Alana will be able to share it with you afterwards. I'll make sure she gets it. And I'm happy to stay until 1:30 if anybody wants to discuss anything else or have any other questions. And also, if you would like to reach out to me, I'll put my contact here in the chat, and it's also on the handout. And I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable, so hopefully everything's okay here. But again, thank you so much for coming. That was lovely. It was a really quick overview, and I'm happy to explore video editing with you at any point if you would be interested in that. Either reach out or talk to Alana, and we can certainly arrange that. Okay, thanks. That's a great question. Any tools or resources to help with storyboarding or shot planning for folks not experienced with these elements of planning video and shoots? I don't have any express resources, but I think especially for folks who are not used to doing this kind of thing, I think conversation actually, there's lots of different tools that you could eventually find on the internet in terms of storyboarding out. But I think the first key step is just talking it through. What is the purpose, first of all? What is it going to consist of? How long is it going to be ideally? And what are your sort of, just like a good story, what are your 3 key things? Your hook, your middle, the meat of it, and your conclusion, your wrap up. To think about it as a story and then literally plan those out. And when you get to that planning stage after you've had some conversation, you can either just, write out a little plan, or you can, I'm sure I don't actually have any, I'm sorry to recommend in terms of storyboarding tools, but I'm sure there are lots on the internet that could just kind of help you map that out. But the first, I think, is the conversation and the thinking through, because in that conversation, you're going to get that thinking through process happening. Okay, any other questions? And feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Oh, yes. Okay. The video editing software, I didn't actually mention it. Thank you for asking that. It is on the handout, but I'll put it here in the chat as well. For iPhone users, it's called Video Leap. And for Android users, it's almost exactly the same. The interface is the same, but they used to be, Video Leap used to be on both Android and iOS, and then somehow they dropped off of Android. But there's one called sorry, it's alerting me in the moment. I'll look at my handout in a second. It's like literally the exact same tools and things. The only place that you're going to run into a difference is the paywall. You hit the paywall quicker. All of these apps are free. They try to trick you into subscribing right at the beginning. Don't do it. Find the little X or find the little way to get past that little, you must buy this. Most of them are free. The ones I'm recommending here are free anyway. And the ones that are, many of the ones that I've listed on the handout are also free, but look before you pay. Is there a way to avoid this? And test it before you decide to pay for it, because it may not be something that you need to pay for. The free version of Video Leap is perfectly fine. Just the only thing that it differs is how many layers for the iOS version. The only difference is the amount of layers and some of the different tools you can use. But if you need more layers, you can just export what you've got and then bring it back in as a camera roll and add more layers. You just can't. Make sure you use the ones that are interplaying first. Which may sound complicated there if you haven't explored editing, video editing, but it's not. And I will look at the handout quickly to see if I can remember what the name is for the Android version. And let's see, and Melissa, if you could scan to see if there's any other questions, or if people want to just unmute and ask a question, happy to do that first as well.
Just a lot of thank yous.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Vivicut, there we go. I don't know why I was blanking on it. It's called Vivicut for Android. I'll put it here in the chat. And the paywall, you hit the paywall quicker with Vivicut. Unfortunately, you can only export at a certain level with Vivicut if you're not paying for it, which is a shame. But there are lots of other apps as well out there. The reason I like Video Leap and Vivicut is that you can really do fairly sophisticated things, even keyframe animation, masking, layering, all sorts of really sophisticated things in a fairly simple way with just using your fingers. And the iOS version works on either tablet or phone. Tablet is nicer. It gives you that bigger screen, especially if you get aging eyes like I do. It's nicer to be able to manipulate on a larger screen. Is it now purchased? Because I know it's hard for me to check because I do buy it, but it might be that trick. Last time I checked, which was not that long ago, it makes you look like you have to purchase it, but you can get around it and not. I can look that up as well really quickly.
It is free, but it does say in-app purchases to access.
Yes. Yeah. So the differences are going to be for the iOS version. It's going to be some of the tools, and you won't be able to export them if you've used the tools that are for pay, but I think they are identified in the app. So just avoid those. And most of the time you don't need them. When you're looking at kind of transitions, they have all sorts of funky transitions, but really the transitions, if you're making video, unless you're making some kind of funny slideshow, transitions, generally speaking, are dissolve or fade. You don't need all the other funky ones and stuff. So, and there are ways to accomplish the things that they're going to ask you to pay that you don't need to. So, yeah. So they do make it tricky though. You have to kind of find how you get rid of that screen that says you have to pay for this. There's a tiny little X somewhere or something that they keep changing how they do it. But there should be a way to get past that. Any other questions or anything anybody wants to talk about? I hope you find the handout useful, and if you come up with questions afterwards, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to help you out, and I hope you enjoy making video. I love mobile photography and videography. I think the fact that it opens the doors to so many people to share their voice in a way that was not possible before mobile devices became so good. Like the quality of a mobile device is really good for creating video and photography. And I love the fact that puts those tools in everybody's hands. Almost everyone has a cell phone nowadays, and they have a good camera then, and then they also have a way to share it. And If you have a Gmail account, you may or may not know this, you probably already know, but you can have your own free YouTube channel the minute you have a Gmail account, and that's free as well. So everybody can be sharing their story and their voice and whatever it is they want to share through social media with good quality tools. And that's, you know, that's a first time in history, really, just relatively recently. Before this, you'd have to have expensive equipment or extensive and expensive training. You know, Video Leap, my favorite story about Video Leap is I was at the Source, I think, or no, Staples. I was going through the checkout counter at Staples and just chattering away about what I was doing currently. And the guy behind the counter said glumly, "Yeah, I know. I spent 3 years in college and a couple $1,000s for a software. My girlfriend can do the exact same thing with Video Leap in 2 weeks." So, but yeah, so dig into your settings. Test and play. I call it poke and play with your things and find what works for you, and check out the handout. There's lots of different resources there, and feel free to reach out if you'd like anything more. And thank you so much for coming.
Perfect. So I think we're going to wrap up since there aren't any more questions. So thank you so much to Pinwa and to Mary and Melissa for joining us and facilitating the session. So as she said, there is a little handbook. I'm going to send that out to people through Eventbrite. So if you get a follow-up email from Eventbrite, you're going to get the link or any attachments likely through there. And then I'll also include any other resources in that email. So again, thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us. And I hope all of you have a great rest of your week. So bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.